Now that our rookie drafts are coming to an end, big sad, I know. It is not time to stop making moves in Dynasty. These are players that you should go out and trade for in your Dynasty leagues. They're different than what we had before because, as we know, there really are very little things that come through and actually change up the Dynasty markets during the offseason. And one of them, the big thing, is the NFL draft. And so now these players actually have, some of them at least, have different values than they did before. And we're going to take advantage and we're going to go trade for them in our Dynasty league. So make sure you drop a like. Make sure you subscribe if you enjoy the content. And the first buy that I have for you today is Xavier Worthy. Nothing really changed with this situation. Honestly, the most notable storyline from an offensive standpoint out of the Chiefs camp during the draft was that Isaiah Pacheco somehow didn't get drafted over. Although, I guess, Isaiah Pacheco being as late of a pick as he was, Brashard Smith technically could be drafted over Isaiah Pacheco. But Xavier Worthy is going to be a buy for us for a couple of reasons. Really, when we're looking at what he did at the end of the year last year, I think we're underestimating it a little bit in the sense that in his last 3 games that he actually played 80% or more of the snaps in, weeks 15 through 17, he had 19, 20, and 22 points. In week 15, he didn't have a touchdown, but he had 11 targets. So here's really like where I look at this. I'm like, okay, maybe this is something. Because you'll remember if you watch the playoffs, Xavier Worthy in the playoffs was also pretty good. But 15, 16, and 17, 11, 11, and 9 targets. So the targets are there. That's really the main thing for Xavier Worthy, because when you're looking at his efficiency stats last year, his opportunity not good. 98 targets, which was 5.8 per game. That was good for 38th in the league, 55th in target share, 63rd in target rate. Now, there is one target metric that we look at, and we're like, okay, that's actually pretty good, and that's red zone targets. He was 10th in the league in red zone targets. He had 18 red zone targets last year. When you're looking at his touchdowns, it coincided with that. He was able to convert a lot of his red zone targets into touchdowns, right? He had 9 touchdowns, which was good for 9th in the league. But when you're looking at his productivity stats, this is really something that we like to look at with these younger receivers, especially year 1 receivers where they're getting established in an offense. Unrealized air yards. 17th in the league. He had 673 unrealized air yards. And so that basically tells us that even though he had a high touchdown rate in his rookie year, he does have room to grow from a yard standpoint and from a target standpoint. It's just going to be a matter of whether that target share actually creeps up this year. Now, the last time I saw a situation like this where we had a young receiver, completely different situation because of the draft capital. The last time, I keep telling Nathan, comparing it to this, the last time I was in this situation where we had a young receiver who at the end of the year posted quite a few good games in a row, and we really didn't know how to value him going into his next year, his sophomore year. It was a man named Amon-Ra St. Brown. And we were wishy-washy on Amon-Ra. Like, I bought Amon-Ra some places, then I sold him again, and I ultimately wish I wouldn't have sold him because that was really stupid of me.
I was buying Amon-Ra. No flex.
But with Xavier Worthy, okay. But with Xavier Worthy, he is somebody that I think is very affordable. You're getting him at 6th, 7th round prices in Dynasty right now. He is somebody that, yes, is going to have to see an uptick in his opportunity, particularly his targets, in order for him to actually perform. However, you're looking at Rashee Rice next year. Maybe he does play right away, but I think even if he does, he's going to take a little bit to get eased back in. If not, so at the very least, Xavier Worthy is going to be the guy I think that Mahomes is most comfortable with, at least for the first couple weeks, if not for, the entire season. Maybe Worthy does come in and he's just as effective as Rice. Obviously, we know what Rashee Rice is capable of. And that's a perfectly valid argument to not go out and buy Xavier Worthy because you really don't know what Rice is going to look like when he comes back in that offense now that we have Xavier Worthy. But Nathan points out in that offense that Xavier Worthy really did kind of step up in that offense when they added DeAndre Hopkins at the end of the year.
And Hollywood came back healthy.
And Hollywood came back healthy. And so I think Nathan's whole thing with this is kind of that when they had the better receivers on the field, it actually opened things up for Xavier Worthy. And with Travis Kelce not really being a production factor there anymore, I think that you can count on somebody taking it. And Worthy's a good wide receiver. Analytically, he was a good prospect. And so don't get me wrong. I see the, shakiness with the Chiefs offense and a fantasy, Also, I see his efficiency was really bad. In yards per out run, he was 76th in the league. Target accuracy was 48th. Yards per target, he was 94th. But in target separation, he was 10th. So, again, there are some, things you look at and you're like, and there are some things you look at, you're like, oh, actually, that's pretty good. So Worthy, I think, is going to be a good buy in Dynasty Fantasy Football for this year, and I'm trading for him.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Kelce, I don't think there's really going to be a target volume concern. You've seen some of the best quarterbacks in the league help support multiple wide receivers in the same offense and be highly productive for both of those guys. And even though we've seen kind of the worst from a fantasy perspective of what Patrick Mahomes is capable of doing, he does still provide plenty of volume, and you saw that right out the gate with a guy like Rashee at the beginning of the year. While Worthy was still producing, it was different because he was getting touchdowns while Worthy was getting volume. But with the Marquise Brown stuff, I do think it's interesting. We actually have the reception perception out for Hollywood last year, and I know it was a limited sample size, but they were just essentially scheming Marquise Brown open. And again, to kind of prove the point of like why Xavier Worthy was able to be so effective is because Xavier Worthy's the speedster guy, the guy that can burn people, the guy that can win on routes just because of his speed. And schematically, Marquise Brown was kind of helping with that overall offense. And you can see his success rate by route, even though he wasn't running a ton of routes until the end of the season. It was nice to see in that limited sample size, a guy like Marquise Brown, if he can help Worthy, I think Rashee Rice is going to be able to do even more. And while he's commanding volume, it'll still help Worthy be productive as well. When you've got those two guys really being the top two guys, Kelsey's now taking a back seat. We were doing like volume analysis last year with like who's going to take the hit from a production perspective in the offenses that seemed a little crowded. We kind of determined that Tank Dell was probably going to be that guy last year. And in the Chiefs offense, we didn't know if Kelsey was going to take another step back or not. We didn't know if Hollywood was going to look really good. Hollywood took the injury, and then Xavier Worthy was productive. So just keep all that in mind. I think Worthy and Rashee can both be very effective there. And now we're going to touch on JSN. I think a totally different type of situation where you don't really have a great elite proven quarterback in Sam Darnold like you do Mahomes in the Chiefs offense, and you don't have a crowded wide receiver room. Contrary to what might be popular opinion at this point, Cooper Kupp doesn't overcrowd that wide receiver room. DK's gone, Tyler Lockett's gone. I really couldn't care less about Torrey Horton being drafted in the 5th round to the Seattle Seahawks. Like, honestly, JSN is the one and the only in that offense right now that I think is going to be like a shot that I'm going to take consistently in fantasy, and a guy that I'm very sold on in Dynasty based off of what he showcased last season. We've never really honestly talked about JSN in being a buy. I think we kind of had him labeled as a hold in the early offseason because of where he was being priced after a great end to the 2024 season. Finishing as wide receiver 9, his target volume started getting higher and higher more consistently towards the end of the year. There were some, better weeks and worse weeks, but ultimately it was looking a lot more solid and a lot more consistent in terms of his route running, how often they wanted to get him the ball and whatnot. Cooper Kupp, I touched on this in the Cornerstones video. Cooper Kupp is seen the last, I think, of his days in the NFL. You're probably only going to see him in the league for a couple more years tops, and he might end up even being like a journeyman wide receiver. They really don't have that much tied into Cooper Kupp. I know the face value of like that contract with Kupp was like, $15 million. You have to view this in the context of the greater valuation of the wide receiver position in the NFL right now, and that is your highest paid, top of the market wide receivers are getting paid roughly $35 to $40 million a year. And when you've got a guy like Kupp, who is an experienced veteran, who is going to help the young guys in that offense, and even a guy like JSN sort of develop, there is monetary value in that, and he still can be utilized exclusively from the slot. You saw value in that from a schematic perspective with how Diggs was in Houston's offense last year before he went down with the ACL. We were expecting regression from Stephon Diggs. We are and have already seen regression. We're expecting and have already seen regression from Cooper Kupp already over the past couple of years. When they move him exclusively to the slot, where he can, again, very similar to how Rashee Rice will open the field for Xavier Worthy. I know JSN isn't the same type of receiver as Worthy, but you're going to see the same sort of effect from a schematic perspective where JSN can kind of do whatever the frick he wants all over the field. And in contrast to Rashee Rice commanding a lot of volume, Kupp is going to be more of that schematic slot wide receiver that isn't going to command a ton of volume, but he is going to allow for the actual most effective and impactful weapons in that offense, like JSN, and even the guys in the backfield, Walker and Charbonnet, be a lot more effective as well. So you can't just let go of DK and can't just let go of Tyler Lockett and not fill that room with something. And I think Cooper Kupp was that short-term answer, honestly. It's kind of a lateral move from what Lockett offered last season. And, Kupp isn't going to be a DK or anything like that. That was just a cap casualty. So while that wide receiver room overall doesn't look as good as it did previously, it looks better for JSN because he doesn't have a DK to compete with. We did always have that question as much as we like JSN as a talent and what he was capable of doing. You always did have that DK question because he's just always going to get his own. He's always going to get about 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, which depending on his price is good, good or bad. Yeah. But with JSN, I'm definitely sold on him this year. I think he's definitely going to establish himself once again as the not only the top option, but a true true alpha in that offense and should be nice for Darnold, who is going to provide a lot of volume, despite the questions and reservations that you might have with him from a talent perspective and consistency. The volume is definitely going to be there.
So again, I tell you this every single time we do a buys video, but buys are always team and situation specific, aka we're going to give some buys for rebuild teams, and we're going to give some buys for competitive teams, and it's going to be completely different based on your team archetype, based on your 3-year outlook. And so if you'd like to know which specific guys you should be trading for on your dynasty team, we can do a team blueprint for you. You get one for free when you come join Domain, which you get the Discord, you get the whole site, the trade calculator, you get the rankings, and again, you get all of the rookie draft tools that we have released. If you've already drafted, you can use them to evaluate rookies and find ones to trade for. If you haven't, you can use them to dominate your rookie draft. So you can get all that, and again, a free team blueprint where Nathan and I break down your dynasty team at flockfantasy.com/domain. Use code domain and your mother flocker to unlock that free team blueprint. The link is going to be down in the pinned comment if you want to check it out and come join the community. But the next buy that we have is going to be a quarterback. And the more that I play Dynasty, especially this offseason, you know, when I'm looking at your Dynasty teams, like I just talked about, when we're looking at your Dynasty teams and we're looking at the players that you have, it just from a value distribution standpoint, because you can only really have, especially out of a startup draft, so much value on your Dynasty team, right? Everybody ends up with, you know, you look at a My Teams tool after the draft and you see they're about the same value, right? With some fluctuations here and there. But the more that I look at Dynasty rosters with top-end level quarterbacks on their roster, the more I am tempted to tell people to down tier, not because, you know, down tier always and down tier because you can, because the thing is, if you're legitimately getting a significant production advantage with a top-end quarterback, then I am totally cool holding them. But the fact of the matter is, at this point in time, there are really only probably 4 quarterbacks that have that. Allen, Daniels, Lamar, Hurts, and then Burrow probably. But then outside of that, when you're looking at that next tier of quarterbacks in Drake May, Mahomes, Caleb Williams, Justin Herbert, Brock Purdy, none of those guys, none of their, you know, value over replacement level guys, none of that's super high. I mean, we're not really looking at those guys and saying, hey, this is, you're getting a superior, you're getting a huge advantage having Joe Burrow over X or having Patrick Mahomes over X. And one of the guys that, you know, you're honestly getting more production from him at a way cheaper price is Baker Mayfield. And I say all of that to get to this point. Baker was the QB4 last year. He was the 5th overall fantasy player, period. He threw 570 times last year for 4,500 yards, and he threw 41 touchdowns.
Something that you haven't seen very much of over the last couple of years.
You're not really seeing a ton of 40-plus touchdown seasons at this point. I mean, at least for the last 2 years. 2nd in passing touchdowns in the league last year.
Look at his rushing usage, like doubling, too.
The offense as a whole was just very dynamic. And it's an offense that, you know, brought back Bucky Irving and Rashad White. You bring back Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, both veterans, but then you add Igbuka to a wide receiver room that already features Jalen McMillan, who we looked at. And basically what you're looking at is fantasy productive Baker Mayfield returns the same offense and adds a guy. And what that tells me is Baker can pretty much throw it anywhere he wants to on the field. And these guys are going to help him return on his fantasy production, from a fantasy production standpoint. Again, like with Baker, when you're comparing him to some of the other top QBs going at the top of startup drafts, yes, he's 30 years old, but so is Mahomes, and Mahomes was the QB 11. So realistically, if you're lacking depth in a start 11 league and you need guys that are high upside flex spots, which we found has been very important to win dynasty leagues, you can down tier from Mahomes to Mayfield and not only not take a production hit, you actually get a production gain and you pay less for it. All right, let's look at Drake May. I mean, Drake May is a little bit of a weird case, but even Drake May, from a points per game standpoint, wasn't up there with Baker Mayfield. But points per game was high. But, you know, Joe Burrow was the QB3, so he was one spot ahead of Baker. When you're looking at their overall points, 381 points for Joe Burrow versus 381 points for Baker. Joe Burrow scored 0.02 more points than him. He had 2 more yards. That was the production difference between Joe Burrow, who's going in the 5th, 6th pick overall in your dynasty startups, and Baker Mayfield, who's going in the 4th, 5th round in dynasty startups. So my point is this. With dynasty, we talk about having the youngest players and having the best player and having all, and it's true, but at the same time, dynasty, the way you win dynasty leagues is scoring points. And the reason that down tiers can be so popular and so effective is the value difference between Burrow in the 1st round and Baker in the 5th is enormous. You can get Baker in a down tier, and Baker won't even be the best player in your down tier if you do it right. You're down tiering to a receiver that you can add into your flex spot and is a super high upside player that's actually going to make a difference in you winning a championship, and you're getting Baker and subbing him in at no production cost. And look, Burrow's maybe not the best example because there are a lot of times you just want to hold Joe Burrow, right? But I say this because even the guys behind him, Justin Herbert, not Griffin Herbert, Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert was the QB 12 last year, and he's going 2.5 rounds higher, right? Caleb Williams. We all know Caleb Williams is kind of the same thing. They've really built a good offense around him. He's QB 16 last year, okay? Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's going he's QB 14. And I'm not worried about age because I think Baker is going to play the next 3 years pretty safely. You look at his contract installation, I'm kind of curious because I know he got extended, but so you already have it up. Look at you. You read my mind.
In 2025, he's got a cap hit of $23 million. In 2026, a cap hit of $49 million. Just based on how he's been playing over the last couple of years and how they've been building around him with the Egbuka pick in the first round of this year's draft, I think they're planning on Baker being there for the long haul. They have really nowhere else to turn at this point because they keep winning the division. They're never in really a position to go draft a replacement level quarterback. And honestly, at this point, you wouldn't even want to get a replacement quarterback because Baker's been solid. He's been very solid. He was a game away from beating the Detroit Lions in the playoffs a couple of years ago, and they looked pretty solid this year as well. So I will say the value that they got Baker at, his cap hit in 2024 was only $6.9 million.
Nice.
That was a prove it year, and boy, did he prove it.
He proved it.
Quite impressive. And now they've gotten him at a value, a crazy value. So he's definitely insulated for the next couple of years for sure. And again, if you have concerns beyond that, look no further than what he's been doing the last 2 years, and that's been a QB1 the last 2 years and getting better every single year. And if you're worried about, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin only, they're the reasons that he's good. Why do you think they drafted Emeka Egbuka, guys? Why do you think they did it? They're confident enough in their offense and how explosive it is with Baker Mayfield at the helm right now that they're willing to go get a guy like Egbuka to kind of continue that on for the foreseeable future. So this is really, really good stuff for Baker and a good sign for his dynasty value long term. And I will add too, from a dynasty startup perspective, Avery was talking about the production return that you're getting for Burrow at his investment level versus a guy like Baker who's much, much, much cheaper. Out of a startup draft, would you rather have Jamar Chase in the first round and Baker Mayfield in the fifth, or Joe Burrow in the first and Zay Flowers in the fifth? Or insert Rumbo Dunze? I don't think it's really a question for anyone from a production perspective at all. So just keep that in mind. Again, strategically, when you're going into your startup drafts, you might want to be taking shots on some of those quarterbacks in the Baker Mayfield price range because what you're getting there from a production outlook perspective is just there's so much more value there. George Kittle, I think, is also again kind of case in point why we think there are just such good values in that range at a cheaper price where when you can get the same level of production from George Kittle, who's going in the 7th round, compared to really some of those higher end tight ends. George Kittle just gets an extension, or he just got an extension. I say
he just gets an extension.
Actively getting an extension.
He's getting one right now.
he's in the process of getting
I just talked
to him.
He's in the room.
I know.
They're hashing it out.
Well, he likes the show, so he comes and chills out. This is a very, very interesting extension that makes him one of the higher paid tight ends in the NFL, if not the highest. I think he's the highest.
It was Trey McBride, and then he got extended right after, and he overtook him. So.
There you go. $14 million cap hit this year, $16 million cap hit in 2026. He has a potential out in 2027, and then he has 3 years of $17, $18, and $20 million cap hits. So they're kicking the can down the road here, and it's very smart strategically for the Niners to do this. And again, this isn't. I don't think this is anything against George Kittle on what his dynasty value should be looking like, anyways, or what his dynasty value should be. I think we think he's one of the best values in dynasty at the moment. With Kittle right now as a 31-year-old tight end going on 32. What else can you ask for? When he has an out 2 years down the road, heading in the 27 class that everyone's looking forward to, by the time we're talking about Jeremiah Smith in the 2027 class is the time that we're going to be wondering where George Kittle is actually going to be long term. And I'm telling you, that's a long ways away. That is 2 full seasons. We play Dynasty in 3-year windows as a contending team. Why the heck would you not invest a 7th, 8th round Dynasty startup pick in George Kittle to go win your league for the next 2 years? There's been no sign of regression whatsoever. The injury stuff has kind of been thrown to the side over the last 3 years. It's just baked into George Kittle's price at this point that he's going to miss a couple games. That's just what he does every single year. His target volume has not gone down. His efficiency has gone up because of all the weapons in that offense, which like his touchdowns, his usage in the red zone has not gone down. George Kittle is going to go down in Dynasty history as one of the best tight ends ever. I mean, he doesn't even require a ton of volume to be highly productive. He doesn't require touchdowns to be highly productive. He can get 7 targets, 6 receptions for 92 yards and put up in a tight end premium format 18 points for you. No problem. That's just another week for George Kittle. You will not find a better bang for your buck asset in Dynasty Fantasy Football right now than George Kittle. And that's at a luxury position at the tight end position. We're not generally advocating that people go heavily invest in tight ends unless they can afford it. George Kittle is one of those exceptions where, like, if you own George Kittle, you've got a good value. And I guarantee you during the season while he's putting up 15 plus points per game, you're gonna be able to get a value win as a reload or a rebuild just because of how many points he's putting up on a weekly basis.
We talked about Baker Mayfield. Now let's talk about one of his receivers. And every year we have ever made Dynasty content, every single one, at least one time, if not multiple, we have had this man on our buys videos. He has literally been a buy. He was a buy when the world began. Mm-hmm. And when the world ends, he will be still a buy. Yep. I'll buy him when he's retired.
I'll buy him when he's retired as well.
Christopher Godwin, a man who, this is important, did not tear any ligaments in his leg. He dislocated his ankle. I can show you the scar on my leg to tell you that I know what it's like to break a bone. And even though it sucks, the recovery is a lot better for that, for a 33-year-old. 29-year-old? Why did I think he was 33? I'm an idiot. If he was 33, I would not be saying this. This 29-year-old, a lot better to recover from a broken bone than it is from ligaments. 10 days ago, Chris Godwin continues to aim to be healthy by week 1. Okay, yeah. And again, I think, the injury's kind of baked into his price at this point. But what has now become baked into his price is Emeka Egbuka, who, admittedly, we are very big fans of. And I think from a schematic standpoint, not talking contracts, not talking timeline, talking schematics, he plays more like Godwin than he does Evans. He does.
There's a reason Egbuka, before the Godwin extension, was being mocked to Tampa every other mock draft that you saw in the early offseason.
Correct. And so Egbuka is going to be probably really good here in the very short-term future, I think. But I don't think, at least right now, and what's the contract that they gave him? They gave him an extension, essentially.
Godwin's extension, yeah. So it was a 3-year, $66 million deal at face value, $44 million guaranteed, $12 million cap hit this year, $33 million cap hit in 2026, which they cannot get out of. There's a club option in 2027 that's $29.9 million. And again, at 29 years old, there's a chance that they pick up that 3rd-year option in 2027. That's definitely a possibility. Guys, the wide receiver that's out of that room is going to be Mike Evans after this year. You want to know what the cap hit difference between this year and next year is for Mike Evans? They owe him $5.5 million this year. Mike Evans is a $5.5 million hit against the cap this year. I don't care if Mike Evans is 38 years old, I'd be keeping him at that price with what he just did last season. Now, when he's 32 years old heading into 2025 with a $25 million cap hit, do you think they're actually going to pick that up? Do you really think they're going to pick that up? Guys, Godwin is not the one that's out the door long term. It's Mike Evans, and it's not even long term, it's short term. Chris Godwin is the one that is going to be the top option for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the foreseeable future. He's being paid like it, and he's got the long-term investment for it. Mike Evans is the one that does not. So I don't know where this now not everyone believes this and not everyone thinks this, but I have seen multiple times that Egbuka is the Godwin replacement. That Egbuka this, Egbuka that. No. That's what we thought before they re-signed Chris Godwin for a 2-year, almost 3-year extension, potential 3-year extension. Mike Evans is contractually Egbuka is replacing Mike Evans. Scheme aside, Egbuka is replacing Mike Evans. And that is why they drafted him, because they did not draft Emeka Egbuka for him to sit behind Godwin for 3 years. They're going to have to find a way to make them work out together. So I'm just here to tell you, I'm not saying that Emeka Egbuka is Mike Evans. I'm just telling you what the numbers are telling us from a cap hit perspective right now and where these guys are actually going to be at the end of 2024. And that is Mike Evans is going to be on a different team, and Godwin is literally stuck there. Like that is a fact. They cannot get rid of him unless they want to lose $49 million in dead cap.
But they just did the contract with him. So they knew that was coming.
Yes.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter. Your point is valid. And again, from a dynasty perspective, I think from a 3-year window standpoint, you have the next 2 solid years at least. But I would buy him as a rental for 1 year. After seeing what he did last year, I mean, when he was on the field, the dude was a top 4 wide receiver in fantasy football. 4. Maybe top 2. And I'm not saying he's going to be that this year, but you're telling me he can't be like a low-end wide receiver 2, mid wide receiver 2. And the price you're getting him at is what now? Like a wide receiver 4 prices?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good value. And the last guy here is going to be Aaron Jones. And Aaron Jones is kind of a throw-in on this list because when I'm looking down at, the cheaper running backs in Dynasty Fantasy Football that actually have, like, running back 2 upside or higher. David Montgomery is valued, like, somewhere in the 9th round, 10th round. Joe Mixon, kind of the same thing. But you got to go pretty far. You got to scroll pretty far. Past Charbonnet, past Swift, past Connor, past ETN, past Benson. You got to go past Tony Pollard. You got to go past Tootin. You got to go past Tyjae Spears to get to Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is the running back 37 on Keep Trade Cut. And so what I'm telling you about this one is he's pretty much free. And look, Aaron Jones is at the tail end of his career. And so I'm not going to come out here and tell you that he's going to dominate for 3 more years. He's 30 years old. And he's on it, in a situation where I think this is probably the last one of his career, or this is the last fantasy production situation of his career. But it's a good situation. Let's not look past the fact that we keep doubting as a dynasty community the Kevin O'Connell offense, and it continues to produce from the quarterback perspective to the wide receiver perspective to the running back perspective. Again, running back 15 last year. He had good volume, 255 carries for 1,100 yards, 4.4 yards per carry still. He only had 5 touchdowns, 5 rushing touchdowns, and 2 receiving touchdowns, and still was the running back 15. So you're looking at how he actually got his points. I mean, and his receiving usage, kind of compared to the rest of his career, was about average, 62 targets, 51 receptions, 400 yards. I mean, with Aaron Jones, for me, it's like I'm looking at these veteran running backs for contending teams, and he's probably the cheapest. And yes, they did go out and trade for Jordan Mason. The trade that they traded for Jordan Mason contained a 5th and 6th round pick swap to get Jordan Mason. And so basically from a team investment standpoint, when you're looking at these 2 guys, because I think Jordan Mason does matter, and Jordan Mason could be somebody who is somewhat productive this year. From a team investment standpoint, you have the exact team investment numbers on these guys because they basically said, or they invested the difference between a 5th and 6th round NFL draft pick for Jordan Mason, right? Now, Aaron Jones, on the other hand, obviously Aaron Jones came over from the Packers, and he still has 2 years left on his deal. They don't even have an out. I mean, he got the signing bonus. It was a 2-year, $20 million deal. Okay, so for reference, he's getting paid $10 million this year. Jordan Mason is getting paid half of that.
Jordan Mason this year is getting paid $2.25 million. And these are the cap hits,
and then 6.8 for Aaron Jones,
and then
3 times the cap hit.
Jones, and then the cap hit in 2026, which if they were to cut Aaron Jones in 2026, they'd save $500,000 to their cap. There would still be an $8.5 million dead cap if they were to cut him next year, but it's like $16.4 million for him, and then for Mason it's $5.8 million. Here's what I really think about Jordan Mason, and again, this is personal opinion. You can totally disagree. I'm just looking at the efficiency metrics here and how Jordan Mason was even utilized in San Fran as a starter last season. This is a do-over on Madison. This is a do-over on Madison with Dalvin Cook being the lead guy in the latter years of Dalvin Cook's productive seasons for the Minnesota Vikings. Aaron Jones isn't going to be like, you know, an absolute stud like he has been or like he was for the Packers for years. But again, he can absolutely be a mid running back too again, which is very, very valuable at his price, which is essentially nothing at the moment. Like from a receiving volume perspective, like Aaron Jones is going to be the receiving back again. That didn't go down last year. It's not going to go down this year. Jordan Mason has no receiving capabilities whatsoever. He's like wildly inefficient. So I wouldn't really count on that. You already see a split consistently. You've seen a split of like carries and opportunities with Aaron Jones and whoever's been in that backfield for whatever team he's been on since he came into the league. That's always been baked into his price. They're just getting another running back to pair with Aaron Jones. And I think at best Jordan Mason is just as good as he was last year, which is probably a running back 3. And again, you can tell me I'm wrong. I'm totally okay with that. But based on the money and the investment, like again, the money does talk in a lot of ways, and we should take that as an indicator on like how these guys are going to be utilized in the offense heading into the season. And I would not be shocked if Aaron Jones, reflecting the cap hit, would be utilized 3 times as much as Jordan Mason was.
And again, he's free. That's the main reason. He costs nothing. You can get him for a third. And right now, he's better than a lot of the running. We didn't think this was going to be the case, but he is better than a lot of the running backs going in the third at this point. So make sure you drop a like. Make sure you subscribe if you enjoy the buys. And again, we can give you personalized buys for your Dynasty team at flockfantasy.com/domain. You can come join, hang out with us, and also unlock everything that we have to offer. But we appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you later.